second musical I asked you to watch is Jekyll and Hyde, uh, with the music and most of the lyrics by Frank Wildhorn. And the difference is that if you watched this musical, you couldn't see the film version. So perhaps just a few words still about Sweeney Todd, the film version, which was made in 2007. And if you only watch the film version, I strongly encourage you to try and see the stage version as well. If you started with the stage version, well, you may or may not want to see the film version. It is different. I prefer the stage version, especially with the direction of Hal Prince. However, if you like the style of Tim Burton, who directed the movie, and especially if you like the actors here are really, really big stars like Johnny Depp as Sweeney Todd and Helena Bonham Carter as Mrs. Lovett and Alan Rickman as the judge. So really a stellar cast. But I think, well, in my opinion, at least personally, that the film version emphasizes the grotesque, emphasizes the weird, the dark humor, and especially Johnny Depp pulls that off very, very well. He can really pull off the weird characters. He collaborated with Tim Burton a few times, and it usually worked, but he doesn't sing so well, and in my view he doesn't really convince when he tries to convey the human, more vulnerable side of Sweeney Todd. Perhaps one of the problems is that he's such a big star and that he is so handsome, and I guess that that's quite a problem with many film versions of musicals, that the directors feel compelled to choose the actors who are younger and much more physically attractive than the characters that they play. And you may ask yourself a question, what does it add, or does it add anything to the story to make Sweeney Todd a younger and more handsome man than probably he was intended to be in the stage version? For me, it doesn't add anything. I can sympathize with a character who's not necessarily physically beautiful, even in a weird way. So, but if you are a fan of Johnny Depp and Tim Burton, go ahead and watch that. Watch the film. It's quite good. It's, well, the visual side, the costumes and all that was quite good. The art direction actually got the Academy Award, so yeah, why not? But now to Frank Wildhorn, another living composer, songwriter, playwright. He's younger generation, at least younger than Stephen Sondheim, and he is a creator of musical theatre who's been much more popular with the audiences than with the critics. This is something that happens to Stephen Sondheim as well, because, but the other way around. Stephen Sondheim is the darling of critics. He loves, he is loved by the critics who like to kind of work with his music, to try to understand the way he does musicals, but sometimes his musicals are not great commercial successes. I would say that Sweeney Todd is an exception rather than a rule. With Frank Wildhorn, it's the other way around. Critics hate him. They have their reasons. They say that he's not very creative in terms of writing melodies, that he self-plagiarizes a lot. So he writes a good tune and he uses it in different shows, in very different emotional capacities. So he's not that I would say, fluent with conveying emotion through melody. However, his shows are very melodious and they follow whatever is popular with the audiences at the time. Some critics say, and I think there's, of course, it is malicious, but it's quite true, that Frank Wildhorn is poor people's Andrew Lloyd Webber. He writes nice tunes, hummable tunes, tunes that you will remember. He doesn't use them as well as Andrew Lloyd Webber, especially the use of leitmotifs, so kind of repeated melodies, to convey something more. He doesn't really do that. But his shows are entertaining. They're not entirely stupid. But he never won a Tony, if I remember. He had a few nominations, but he never ever won the Tony. However, he was the first American composer, or one of the very, very few American composers to have 3 shows running simultaneously on Broadway. This happened in 1999, and Jekyll and Hyde was one of these shows. Another one, I guess, my favorite show by Wildhorn, The Scarlet Pimpernel, which is his answer possibly to Les Miserables, because this is set in France and this is set during the real French Revolution. And we have a heroic character who tries to save people, the aristocrats. He saves the aristocrats. He's a literary character. You may want to look it up, The Scarlet Pimpernel. Jekyll and Hyde, I would say, is Wildhorn's answer to Sweeney Todd, probably. Even if you look at the construction of the show, with the chorus at the beginning in the prologue, and singing this kind of introduction chorus about the society, about the facade, meaning like everybody's wearing a mask and all those nice Victorians are mostly bad people who just get away with it. So once again we have the story based on a literary source, this time I would say a more respectable literary source than some Penny Dreadful, because it's based on a novella by Stevenson, Robert Louis Stevenson, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You may know it from literature courses, at least I did. So it's one of the standard works included in any Gothic collections or the discussions of the Gothic mode. We also have the problem, the theme of madness, and this time, of course, it's the madness of the good doctor himself. You may recall, either from literature or from the show, we have the main character being a kind of quintessential or stereotypical Victorian mad scientist who has a burning ambition, who wants to achieve something in the world. And this time it is, at least in the musical version, it is the cure for madness. You may recall he is doing it because of a personal motive. His father has gone insane and has been committed to a mental asylum. So for Jekyll, this is really a tragedy. So he tries to come up to invent a magical chemical formula that would cure madness. Of course, Henry Jekyll is not mad, but he believes that the best and perhaps the most honest way to convey scientific experiments is to experiment on oneself. Not a good thing, really, but this is what he believes. This is very Victorian, and he, being a kind of Victorian hero, experiments on himself. So he first creates a formula to induce madness, which causes the dark side the alter ego, the bad twin, to emerge. So the good Dr. Henry Jekyll has the bad twin in the person who calls himself Edward Hyde. This is a very Victorian trope, the doppelganger, the double. It could be an evil twin, it could be, like here, the evil side of the main character's personality. Probably if you watched the stage version, you encountered the version with David Hasselhoff, the man who made quite a name as a kind of handsome young actor in Baywatch, which was a kind of TV series about life savers at the beach. So he was a kind of beach body. I wasn't very sure that he's going to pull that off, but surprisingly he did. And perhaps the most convincing moment, and for me the best moment in the whole musical, is the song called Confrontation, when the two characters, in one character of course, come together. They fight, they have a duel. So one actor has to play simultaneously Jekyll and Hyde, dueling, quarreling, fighting with each other. This is a classical 11 o'clock number, so a kind of song towards the end of the musical. The song that brings together many of the subplots, that provides some sort of closure, and of course this closure is that the two sides of Dr. Jekyll come together. So just like Sweeney Todd, he succumbs to madness. Just like Sweeney Todd, at least in the beginning, he has a noble aim that goes very badly wrong, but you can understand him. Actually, once again, I'm so sorry I cannot see you and I cannot ask you right away, what do you think of the character of Jekyll and Hyde? I remember from one of the earlier editions of this course, one of the students said that she actually liked Hyde more than Jekyll, which was quite shocking for me, because Hyde is a really violent and murderous madman. But the student said she believed that Hyde was a man who didn't lie. He was the natural man, the man unrestrained by the society, by the culture. He was purely a natural man, and he actually did all the murders that Henry Jekyll could only think about, could only dream about. So basically, Jekyll, for most of the time, did not kill indiscriminately. He killed the people who wronged Henry Jekyll. So Hyde was like the voice of just revenge. He was the voice of the downtrodden, of the underclass, of the working class who have been abused by the upper sections of the Victorian society. If you remember, the whole story starts when the young, ambitious and well-meaning Henry Jekyll is refused a money grant from a board of governors. So these are the people who will be killed, and they are not innocent. They are all to blame. They are all just the facade, which is again a very Victorian stereotype, that all those Victorians were really nasty people and hypocrites, and they were bad, and they really deserved to die, much more than the victims, most of the victims of Sweeney Todd. So we continue